I once was lost. Hallelujah. When I was a young lad, I had the tendency to, on occasion, to separate myself from my parents in public places. In other words, I often found myself being lost and separated from my parents. Now, I'm still working it out in my mind whether or not it was because I strayed away from them, or perhaps was it that they ran away from me. Have mercy, because admittedly I was a handful. But I choose in my mind to believe that it was the former, that it was me. It was on me that I strayed away from my parents. And I recall one particular incident where my mother and I went to a department store, and true to form, I separated myself from my mother. I wandered off, and when I discovered that my mother was not in my view, of course, as a young child, I started to panic and started to cry. And one of the sales clerks, they call them associates now, she came to me and asked me, "Are you lost?" And I said, "I don't know where my mother is." And she asked for my mother's name, and all I ever called my mother was Mom, our mama. So that's the only name that I knew. Her name was Mama. Her name was Mama. And the clerk asked me my name, and I said Kevin. And they took me to the service counter, her and one of the security guards. And they announced over the PA, if you are missing a child by the name of Kevin, and your name is Mommy, you can pick him up. You can pick him up at the service counter. Hallelujah. And what seemed to me to be an eternity, which was actually just a few minutes, my mother showed up. And at least acted like she was relieved to find me safe and sound. But for those few moments when I was lost, I felt all alone. I felt abandoned. I felt frightened and scared. And I stopped by to tell somebody that before we meet Jesus for ourselves, we need to understand that we are lost. But when Jesus comes into our life, how many know that Jesus makes all of the difference? That when Jesus finds us, I know some people like to say, I found Jesus, but the fact of the matter is Jesus was never lost. We were lost, and so we can't find him. He finds us. And so I want you to know that Jesus is looking for you and wants you to know that he cares. He cares about you. In the text, we find that Jesus, the text says that Jesus entered into and passed through Jericho. He entered into and passed through Jericho. He entered into and passed through Jericho. I believe Luke pointed out the fact that Jesus passed through Jericho because it was never Jesus' intention that he would stay in Jericho for a long time. Have mercy. But Jesus understood he had a specific task in Jericho, and once that task had been completed, that he would just be passing through. Please understand that there was no practical reason why Jesus would go to Jericho. In my eyes, Jericho was out of the way. When Jesus was coming from Galilee down, making his descent down to Jerusalem. He could have went straight through Samaria and down to Jerusalem. But he decided that he would make a detour and go left into Jericho. Why would Jesus go out of his way? We learn as children that the shortest distance between 2 points is a straight line. Why wouldn't Jesus go straight? Jesus understood that there was a man named Zacchaeus in Jericho who needed to hear a word from the Lord. And I stopped by your house today to let you know that no matter where you are, you're not out of the way for Jesus to stop by your house. Jesus wants to come to where you are. Don't ever think that your presence or your place is out of the way for Jesus. Jesus wants to meet you right where you are. Jesus passed through Jericho, and there in Jericho was a man by the name of Zacchaeus. Now, Zacchaeus was a publican. Not only was he a publican, but he was the chief among the publicans. Now, understand that the publicans were despised by the Jews. The Jews detested publicans. They looked at the publicans in the same eye as any other sinner. As a matter of fact, to the Jews, the title publican was synonymous with sinner. They despised them. They despised them because the publicans were tax collectors. But not only would they take the legitimate tax, but they would extort money from those who they were collecting the taxes from. And that's why the Jews could not stand the publicans. And here was Zacchaeus. He was a chief among publicans. I can pause right here for a moment. In the spirit of transparency, I'm one who likes gangster movies. Have mercy. In the spirit of transparency, I like gangster movies. Don't judge me, just pray for me. I like a good gangster movie. And so I know a gangster story when I read one, when I see one. And as I read this and see that publicans were extortionists, I'm reminded of the Italian mafia, have mercy, who also were known for racketeering and extortion. And so as we look at the publicans, in my mind, I categorize them as the Jewish mafia. And if the publicans were the Jewish mafia and Zacchaeus was the chief of the publicans, then Zacchaeus would have been Don Zacchaeus or the Godfather. Have mercy on my soul. And so Zacchaeus, who was Don Z, that's what I call him, Don Z, the head of his own family, of the Jewish mafia, he resided in Jericho, and it says that he was very rich. But in verse 3, here was Don Zacchaeus, chief of the Jewish mafia, of the publican mafia, have mercy. But the text says that he sought to see Jesus. Have mercy. Here was the Don, the godfather of the Jewish mafia, but yet he still had a desire to see Jesus. I stopped by to let you know, even though we are sinners, God still places something inside of us that gives us a desire to see Jesus. Some of us were some places where we shouldn't have been last night. But this morning you had a desire to turn on your phone, to turn on Facebook Live to see Jesus. I thank God that God is not like man who puts us in a box. Have mercy on my soul. I'm so glad that God is not a God who only gives us a second chance. But do I have a believer in the house who understands that God is a God of another chance? And I thank God for God placing something inside of us. Thank you, Lord. That even when we are in our sins, have mercy, He still gives us a desire to see Jesus. The word says that Zacchaeus had a desire to see Jesus, but he could not because he was short in stature. Wow. He could not see Jesus because Jesus, have mercy, at this time in his ministry always drew great crowds. And so there was a great multitude there to see Jesus. And because of Zacchaeus' short stature, he could not see over nor around the crowd. Have mercy. So Zacchaeus decided, if I can't see over them, if I can't see around them, the text said he ran ahead of them and climbed up a sycamore tree just so he can see Jesus. Have mercy. Can I pause right here for a moment? The text says Zacchaeus, the godfather, have mercy, Don Z of the Jewish mafia, he took off running in front of the crowd and climbed up a tree just like he was a little child. He ran and climbed the tree like he was a child. Have mercy on my soul. I can't help but remember reading somewhere where Jesus said, unless we be as a little child, we shall not see the kingdom of God. In other words, we have to get up off of our high horses and become like little children. Don't you know little children are worried about what people think? Children are worried about what people say. Children are worried about people pointing at them. Children just want what they want. And they're going to do what they need to do to get what they want. Have mercy. In other words, Jesus is telling us how we have to stop worrying about what other people may say about you. And God has blessed you. Go ahead and praise him anyhow. And God has been good to you. Lift up holy hands. And God has been good to you. Go ahead and shout to the glory of God. Don't worry about what others may say. Don't worry about people pointing their finger at you. And God has been good to you. Go ahead and open up your mouth and give God some praise. Praise him anyhow. When I think of the goodness of Jesus and all that he's done for me, my soul cries out, hallelujah. Thank you. Thank you, God. Savior. How Zacchaeus acted like a little child. He ran and climbed up a tree because he could not see past the crowd. Can I go a little further with this one? Is that all right? All right. Zacchaeus could not see Jesus from his current location. And so he understood if there is any way for me to see Jesus, I have to reposition myself. I have to relocate myself. I can't stay where I am. If I have any chance of seeing Jesus and having Jesus recognize me, then I have to relocate myself. How does Zacchaeus ran ahead and climbed up a sycamore tree? Have mercy on my soul. Some of us are wondering why. It's difficult for us to hear from God. Perhaps you're trying to hear from God from a position that God does not want you to be in. Perhaps you need to think about repositioning yourself. Maybe God is not no longer talking to you at the level you were at last year, but in 2020, God wants you to climb a little bit higher for the blessing that he has in store for you. You can't handle it at a lower level, but God needs you to elevate yourself so that you can receive what he has. Now for you, he climbed up the sycamore tree. Have mercy. And when Jesus got to the place, I feel the Spirit now. I feel God moving. Come on and walk with me, Brother Cameraman. when Jesus got to the place where Zacchaeus was, the Bible says, have mercy on my soul. When he got to the place where Zacchaeus was, he stopped and he looked up and he saw him. And Zacchaeus would have stayed where he was. How Jesus never would have saw him. But because Zacchaeus moved, repositioned himself, and climbed a little higher, when Jesus got to where Zacchaeus was, then Jesus was able to see him. Perhaps you're not hearing from God because you're in the wrong position. Come out of that old place. Come out of that old mindset. Stop doing the same old thing that you've been doing for 10 years. If it ain't worked in 10 years, baby, try something new. Reposition yourself to get to a new place in God. When Jesus got to the place where Zacchaeus was, it says he looked up, have mercy, and he saw Zacchaeus. Oh, praise be to God. God sent me into your living room, into your hospital room, to let you know that your prayers have been heard. God wants you to know, even though it seems as though no one knows who you are, as though no one listening to you, as no one cares, God sent me to you to declare to you, he sees you. God said, I see you, and I know who you are. When Jesus got to the place where Zacchaeus was, he looked up and he saw Zacchaeus. And Jesus said, Zacchaeus, make haste, come down, for today I must abide at your house. Here it is. I'm getting ready to close. You can get ready to cut your Facebook off. But before I go, let me leave you with this. The Bible says that Zacchaeus did exactly what Jesus told him to do. Zacchaeus made haste. That means he hurried up. That means he didn't have a conference call. He didn't take a minute to think about it. He just moved. Too many times we missed our blessing because we took too much time thinking about what God said. When God says move, baby, you need to move. Make haste. Not only did he make haste, but the Bible says he came down. He only went up so that he could be viewed by Jesus, so that he could be seen by Jesus. But once Jesus saw him, he can come back down. He didn't go back to where he was, but he came down. Come down off your high horse. Stop thinking that you did it by yourself. But I stopped by to let you know, if it had not been for the grace of God on our side, where would we be? How he came down. Here it is. I'm taking my coat and getting ready to go home. But before I go, it says Zacchaeus, after he came down, he received Jesus joyfully. Have you received Jesus joyfully? This word is for you. If you never received Jesus into your life, if you never made him Lord over your life, this word is for you. It's time for you to receive him joyfully. That means he was lost. He was lost. But now Jesus found him. Is anyone excited? Is anyone glad
in your sins. But Jesus